Time to check out the three biggest betting lines of the college football weekend, week 5, here with Steve Merrill from Wager Talk and Pro Sports Info. We encourage you to head on over to prosportsinfo.com and also Wager Talk TV right here on YouTube and check out Steve's work on not just college football, but the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA. All right, Steve, good to see you today.
Hey, Mark, great to be back.
Got quite the list of college football games and three enormous ones. Let's start in the SEC with Arkansas at Georgia. The Hogs have been impressive against Texas and Texas A&M, but still a huge 18.5-point dog at Georgia.
Yeah, and the line might seem too big to many, but I was even surprised when I crunched the numbers, ran through all the sims on my database. I actually came out with 25, so it actually is not big enough, believe it or not. So I do think, surprisingly, there is value laying this big number with Georgia in this game. And look, Arkansas is 4-0 straight up. They've done everything they need to. They're also a perfect 4-0 against the spread, including outright underdog wins as 6-point dogs against both Texas and A&M. Now, keep in mind, though, when they face Texas in week 2 is the first true road trip for Sarkisian, a new coaching staff, new schemes, young team. But still, Arkansas looked really good in that game. Last week was impressive for me, though. They were a 6-point dog. They beat A&M on a neutral field. But once again, that was a neutral field. It was the first time they traveled all year. Now they're playing their first true road game in a very difficult situation. Also could be a little bit of a letdown after that A&M win. Not just a letdown, but just wear and tear letdown. Meanwhile, Georgia went through the motions last week. They coasted to a 62-0 blowout of Vanderbilt. So I do think the situational setup is really good for Georgia here, and we do get some line value on top of it. We're going to find out what Arkansas is made of this weekend.
Folks, just a reminder, you get trends, stats, and facts from Steve on the three biggest games of the week right here at the Voice of College Football, but join him on Wager Talk TV right here on YouTube and also Pro Sports Info. You get Steve's under-the-radar pick of the week over on Patreon, so please join us there. Another enormous game in the SEC. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, very impressive in wins over Tulane and Louisville, taking on Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa as a 14.5-point dog.
Yeah, and once again, the common theme when you have these top 20 matchups is it's the one time the public plays dogs. I have a very popular video on Wager Talk TV, wagertalk.com. It's my Fade the NFL public plays every weekend. And they usually always play favorites. They always play overs. But one thing you'll notice when it's a high-profile game with two good teams, then they start leaning underdog. And by the way, Arkansas is a very public dog in that last game we just talked about. It's another reason the line's a little lower than my power ratings. Once again, Ole Miss is getting some public love this week, especially with Florida almost pulling that upset over Alabama a couple weeks. All of a sudden, the most powerful team in college football is not a public play anymore. Who would have thought? And I think we get value once again. This might seem like a big number, 14.5. It's almost like they're baiting you to take Mississippi with that key half point. But I make the line 20, Mark, actually 20.5. And what's interesting about this game, we talk about the opening numbers, and you always have to be careful because sports books around the world and in Las Vegas and around the world now and around the U.S. and all the other states, they open at different times on Sunday for the college football lines. And a lot of times, one will open way off from another, and the marketplace decides. That was the case with this game. I saw the Circa in Las Vegas open at -20. I saw a look-ahead line the week before at -17 at DraftKings before the games were played. And then I saw some of the sharp offshore books open around 16. And guess what? The marketplace decided it quickly came down to 16, and now it's 14.5. But once again, I actually agreed with that bigger number as my power ratings make it 20.5. I'm not going to play against Bama in a spotlight game. Now, Ole Miss is a dangerous underdog. They're much better, at least they look better defensively this year than last year. They played Alabama tight last year. They should be better this year. Bama should be a little bit weaker. But I'm still not sold on that Ole Miss defense come crunch time. I think Alabama will come out with their A game. Ole Miss does have a lot of backdoor cover potential, throwing for almost 10 yards per pass, so that is a concern. But I'm telling you, I think we might see some 14s by Saturday. And at 14 or less, there would definitely be some value at that point with Alabama.
Cincinnati went on the road a couple weeks ago and covered against a decent Indiana team. Notre Dame as an outright dog won the game 41-13 neutral site against Wisconsin this past week. Notre Dame taking on Cincinnati. The Bearcats coming off a bye week, and Notre Dame a slight underdog.
Yeah, this is another interesting look ahead versus opening line. Last week, DraftKings was the only book I saw with a look ahead line on this, like last Thursday or so. And they had the look-ahead line as Notre Dame -1. over Cincinnati. Cincinnati did not play last week, as you mentioned. Notre Dame goes out as a 6-point dog and wins 41-13. Yet when the real number comes out Sunday afternoon at all the sports books, they make Cincinnati a 2-point favorite. It goes up to -3. Now it's back down to -1.5 and 1. So it's like, what did Notre Dame do wrong? Well, first of all, they were outgained by over 50 yards in that game. They had a 5-1 turnover edge against Wisconsin. It was a very misleading 41-13 win. And the real red flag for me was they got out. They only rushed for 3 rushing yards on 32 attempts. They had some trouble. The quarterback situation is dicey still, to say the least. Keep in mind, Notre Dame was the most veteran team in college football last year. Of all the power teams, they had more starts from seniors than any other team, about a 70% start ratio. They returned only 3 starters this year on offense, only 5 on defense. So a very young team. The question is, are they at that level now where they reload? They're only one of a handful of teams that has made 2+ playoff appearances over the last decade. I'm not sure they're quite at that level, though. I think they're a little bit of a phony team this year. So now the question becomes, can Cincinnati take advantage? This is arguably the biggest game in the history of this program, at least in the modern era. If they win this game, they're in very good shape to probably run the table and make the playoffs, especially with Clemson having 2 losses, Ohio State having a loss already as well. Cincinnati also has the bye week, as you mentioned. I think that's a huge scheduling edge in this game, and it's hard to imagine a battle of top 10 opponents. There might be a letdown, but Notre Dame might actually be a little flat for this game. They're coming off the big Wisconsin win. They've had 4 straight big games to start the season. They had that back-and-forth overtime game against Florida State, a near miss against Toledo, a dangerous Toledo team they barely beat by 3. Purdue, a team that a lot of people liked in that game, they win by 14. And then last week, as I mentioned, a very misleading blowout of Wisconsin. I think it's a good setup for Cincinnati. Unfortunately, my power ratings do favor Notre Dame by 1, so we're giving up a little bit of line value. But the other thing that concerns me, Mark, is Notre Dame's won 26 home games in a row, and now they're a dog. So there's no value with Cincinnati in this game, but I think they're probably the play here. I think they might be as good, if not better, and they're going to be ready to play. It's a huge game for that program.
Once again, everyone, keep in mind you can join Steve on Wager Talk TV right here on YouTube and wagertalk.com. And also it's prosportsinfo.com with the complete look at Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL, as well as college football. And, of course, join us now on Patreon for Steve's Under the Radar Pick of the Week. That's exclusively at our Voice of College Football community on Patreon.